Hello, my friend. The world of magic, filled with legends and ancient tales, is opening its gates once again. Tonight, in the Gryffindor dormitory by the crackling fireplace, I will share another story with my friends. Join us, for the magic is about to come alive.
The wind carried a chill through the crumbling ruins of Saint Perron Monastery, its touch whispering over moss-covered stones and shattered stained glass. The sun had long since set behind the gray hills of Brittany, leaving the old place drowned in moonlight. A young witch knelt in the shadow of a fallen archway, her wand light flickering over the ancient carvings. Dust shimmered in the beam, rising like spirits disturbed from slumber. Her name was Clara Dunthorne, cursebreaker for Gringotts Wizarding Bank, and she had spent the last 3 months tracing the faintest rumor that Nicolas Flamel's legacy had not ended with the destruction of the Philosopher's Stone. Wizards whispered of vaults beneath forgotten monasteries, of locked rooms where his experiments slept in silence. Most called it foolish talk, but Clara was not one for superstition. She was a seeker of truth, and the truth had brought her here. Her gloved hand brushed across a cracked sigil etched into the wall, a circle crossed by a triangle, inside of which shimmered the faint outline of a stone. "The mark of transmutation," she murmured. Her heart beat faster. She could almost feel the hum of magic buried beneath the earth. Lumos Maxima. Light bloomed, revealing a stairway half buried under rubble. The steps wound down into darkness, into a tunnel that had not seen a living soul in centuries. The air smelled of damp parchment and old iron. She descended slowly, every sense sharpened. As a cursebreaker, she knew what death traps ancient alchemists liked to leave behind. And Flamel, she suspected, had been no exception. Halfway down, her wand light caught something on the wall, a phrase written in Old French. "Ce qui est créé pour la vie peut mettre fin à la mort." That which is made for life can bring an end to death. Clara whispered the words under her breath, feeling a strange weight settle in her chest. What had Flamel meant? The stairway ended in a small chamber. Shelves of rotted wood leaned against the walls, covered in broken glass vials and dust-choked books. But at the far end stood a stone table, its surface carved with runes that pulsed faintly when her light passed over them. Upon it rested a single object, a leather-bound journal, half-burned and crumbling at the edges. Clara's fingers trembled as she opened it. The first pages were lost to fire, but what remained spoke of impossible things. Formulas of transmutation, sigils of protection, and one repeated symbol, 2 circles intertwined, labeled Les Jumeaux de la Pierre, the twin stones. Her breath caught. The Philosopher's Stone was supposed to have been unique, one creation, one miracle. Yet here, in Nicolas Flamel's own hand, was talk of another, an imperfect twin, hidden so that no mortal might wield both life and death unchecked. A soft sound made her freeze, a whisper of air, the faintest scrape of metal on stone. She spun around, nothing, only shadows. Then a movement, just a flicker in the far corner of the room. Her wand light fell upon a figure cloaked in gray, face hidden, standing between her and the stairs. "Who's there?" she demanded, raising her wand. The figure said nothing. A moment later it vanished, dissolving into smoke that drifted toward the ceiling and disappeared through a crack in the stone. Clara's pulse thundered. Someone else knew about this place. Someone had followed her here. She shoved the journal into her satchel, sealed it with a protective charm, and hurried up the stairs. The runes on the walls glowed faintly red as she passed, warning sigils, now awakened by her intrusion. When she emerged into the night, the moon had risen higher, casting long silver shadows across the ruins. Her enchanted compass, a tool used by curse breakers to detect dark enchantments, spun wildly. Whatever forces guarded this monastery were stirring again. She disapparated with a loud crack, the wind closing in where she had stood a heartbeat before. By morning, Clara was back in London, seated in the dim office of Gringotts' Magical Discoveries Division, a place of shelves stacked high with maps, scrolls, and peculiar devices humming softly to themselves. She placed the journal on her desk, studying the faintly glowing seal that protected it. Only one goblin, her superior, knew she had gone to France at all. But as she reached for her quill to record the find, a faint knock echoed at the door. "Enter," she called. The door opened, and in stepped a man she hadn't expected to see in her lifetime. His robes were travel-stained, his brown hair streaked with gray, and his eyes carried the calm weight of someone who had seen both terror and wonder in equal measure. "Professor Neville Longbottom," Clara said, startled. "I thought you retired from active teaching." Neville smiled faintly. "I did. But you've stirred up quite the rumor in certain circles, Miss Dunthorne. Some of my colleagues in France said you've uncovered something to do with Nicholas Flamel." Her hand went instinctively to the sealed journal. "A rumor," she said carefully. Neville's eyes twinkled with the same kind of quiet wisdom that once belonged to Albus Dumbledore. "Rumors often hide truth. Tell me, did you find it? The stone?" Clara hesitated, feeling the weight of the night's discovery pressing upon her. "Not the stone," she said softly, "but perhaps something worse. Or better, depending on who finds it first." Neville's expression hardened. "Then you're not the only one searching." At that, a chill crept through the room, as though unseen eyes were watching from the shadows. Somewhere far away, in the heart of the French Alps, the gray-cloaked figure who had followed her knelt before a circle of robed wizards. "The journal is found," he whispered. "The heir of Flamel's secret will rise again. The ashen circle will not fail." And far below Gringotts, in the deepest vaults where dragons guarded ancient treasure, a single rune flared briefly upon a forgotten wall, the same symbol Clara had seen in the monastery. Two circles intertwined, the sign of the twin stones. Rain pattered softly against the high windows of Gringotts as the city outside stirred to its morning rhythm. Beneath the vaults of polished marble and dragon-guarded halls, Clara Dunthorne sat with the unease of one who had uncovered more than she was meant to. The half-burned journal of Nicholas Flamel lay before her, its leather still faintly warm to the touch, as though some ancient spark yet lived within it. Professor Neville Longbottom paced slowly, eyes drawn to the flicker of red runes sealing its cover. His manner was calm, but Clara could sense the weight of old battles behind that calm. The quiet courage of a man who had faced darkness before and would do so again if called. "You said there were two stones," Neville murmured at last. "Flamel's writings hinted at many mysteries, but never this. What makes you believe it?" Clara turned the journal toward him, showing a page that had survived the fire. "Here, the twin stones. He writes that the first granted life, but that the second was its counterbalance. a safeguard should immortality ever fall into the wrong hands. Neville frowned. An end to immortality? That sounds like something even Dumbledore would have feared to wield. She nodded. The inscription in the monastery said as much. That which is made for life can bring an end to death. It's not just alchemy. It's a fail-safe. The words hung in the still air like smoke. Neville crossed to the window, watching carriages rattle through Diagon Alley below. If that's true, then there will be those who'll stop at nothing to find it. You said you were followed? Clara hesitated. Yes, a cloaked figure. He vanished before I could see his face. Neville's eyes darkened. That would be the Ashen Circle. They were alchemists once. Fanatics who believed the stone was stolen from them by Flamel. They've survived in the shadows for centuries, worshipping the promise of eternal life. If they learn of a second stone, they already know, Clara interrupted quietly. The man in gray found me before I left France. For a long moment, the only sound was the low hiss of the rain. Then Neville straightened his robes and took a deep breath. Then we must move quickly. I know someone who can help us. Someone who studied Flamel's work more closely than anyone alive. Who? Scorpius Malfoy. Clara blinked. Malfoy, as in the son of Draco, yes. He's not his father. Scorpius teaches alchemical theory in Paris, and he's obsessed with Flamel's lost experiments. He might be the only one who can decipher what's left of that journal. Clara studied Neville's face, searching for hesitation. There was none. Whatever history bound these names together, it no longer mattered. The Ashen Circle was moving, and time was running short. 2 nights later, Clara and Neville stood on the cobbled streets of Paris, cloaks drawn against a rising wind. The moon hung low over the Seine, silvering the roofs and chimneys of the old city. They moved quickly through narrow lanes until they reached a crooked tower that leaned against the sky like a half-finished thought. A brass plaque by the door read, Atelier Alchimique, S. Malfoy. Inside, the air smelled of parchment, smoke, and molten metal. Strange glass orbs glowed softly on the tables, and runic diagrams shimmered across the walls like living maps. At the far end of the workshop, a tall young man with pale hair bent over a bubbling cauldron, his eyes gleaming through a pair of enchanted goggles. When he turned, a sharp, knowing smile touched his lips. Professor Longbottom, he said, and a guest. What brings the famous herbologist and his companion into my den of fumes and formulas? Neville smiled faintly. Business of the oldest kind, the kind that once obsessed Nicholas Flamel. Scorpius removed his goggles. Ah, the Philosopher's Stone. You're centuries too late for that tale, I'm afraid. Not if there was more than one, Clara said, stepping forward. The humor vanished from his eyes. More than one? Neville nodded toward the satchel at Clara's side. Show him. She hesitated, then broke the seal and laid the half-burned journal on his desk. Scorpius examined it with reverent care, his fingers tracing the charred edges. Flamel's hand, no doubt, he whispered. And look at this ink. He wrote this after the stone was supposedly destroyed. He flipped through the pages, stopping at a sigil that shimmered faintly when the light touched it. 2 circles intertwined. The twin stones, he breathed. He really did it. Clara leaned in. Can you translate it? He nodded slowly. Yes, but this isn't a map. It's a riddle. Look here. Where the fire that grants life meets the water that takes it, there shall rest the second flame. He's describing a location, the intersection of 2 elemental forces. Neville frowned. A volcano? Scorpius smiled. Or something far older. France sits atop ancient ley lines, rivers of magical energy that flow beneath the land. If we trace them to where fire and water converge. He stopped suddenly, eyes widening. The Grotto of Glass. It lies beneath the Pyrenees, sealed since the 14th century. Alchemists once believed it to be the place where the earth itself was born. Neville exchanged a grim glance with Clara. Then that's where they'll go. As if summoned by the words, a crash echoed outside. The windows rattled. Scorpius spun around, wand raised. They've found us. Shadows swept past the glass. 3 figures in gray, their movements unnaturally fluid. The air crackled with dark energy as the door shuddered under a spell. "Protego Maxima!" Clara shouted. A shimmering barrier flared around the workshop, just as the door burst open in a storm of splinters. Bolts of crimson light filled the air, scattering vials and scrolls in every direction. Neville ducked behind a table, firing stunning spells that sent 2 attackers crashing into the walls. Scorpius hurled a flask of liquid silver that erupted into a blinding cloud of smoke, but the 3rd figure slipped through the haze, his wand glowing with a sickly green hue. "Give us the journal," he hissed. His voice was low, inhumanly calm. Clara stood firm. "Never." The man's eyes flashed from beneath his hood, gray, cold, and ancient. "Then you have sealed your fate." He raised his wand, but before the curse struck, Scorpius shouted an incantation that tore open the floor beneath their feet. A rush of air, a cry, and the world dissolved into darkness. When the smoke cleared, the attackers were gone, vanished, as though swallowed by the shadows themselves. Neville helped Clara to her feet, brushing dust from her cloak. "You all right?" She nodded shakily. "Yes, but they know about the grotto now. We have to move before they reach it." Scorpius sealed the ruined door with a wave of his wand. "Then we go south. The Grotto of Glass lies in the Valley of Firewater. I can get us there." Neville turned to Clara. "You began this search. You should finish it. But know this. Once we find what Flamel hid, there may be no turning back." Clara met his gaze. "There never is when truth is the prize." And so as dawn broke over Paris, 3 figures cloaked in storm gray slipped quietly into the mist, bound for the mountains where fire met water, and where the second stone, if it truly existed, waited to be found. Far behind them, in the shadowed workshop, the embers of a fallen lantern flared once, and from within the smoke, a faint whisper coiled through the air. "The ashen circle rises." The journey southward began beneath a low, iron sky. The trio traveled by broom at first, gliding over the rain-washed valleys of France, their cloaks snapping like dark wings in the wind. When the weather grew fierce and the mountains rose ahead, they dismounted and pressed onward on foot. The Pyrenees loomed like an ancient wall, silent, watchful, and veined with mists that clung to the peaks like memory. By the 3rd night they reached the old border village of Saint-Clair-sur-Lune, a place half forgotten by the modern world. The houses leaned together as if whispering secrets, and lamplight shimmered across puddles on the cobblestones. It was there, beneath the crooked sign of the Silver Chalice Inn, that they took refuge. The innkeeper was a stooped wizard with eyes like burnished gold and a habit of muttering to his cat. He served them a meal of bread, soup, and fire whiskey so strong it nearly set Neville coughing. When Clara asked about the Valley of Firewater, the old man went still. "You seek the grotto?" he rasped. Then may the stars pity you. Many have gone to that valley, few have returned. The mountains guard what they choose to guard. Some say they remember Flamel himself. Scorpius leaned forward. You've heard of him then? He came here once, said the innkeeper. Long before my time, but the tale endures. A man of light who carried death in his pocket. He built a gate of living glass deep beneath the rocks, and beyond it, something no mortal should touch. The cat gave a low hiss, and the fire sputtered in the hearth. Clara's voice was soft. And where is this gate? The old wizard pointed toward the peaks that shone silver under the moon. Follow the stream that burns cold. It runs both fire and water, hence the name. Where its light fades, you will find what you seek. They thanked him and retired to their room upstairs. Sleep came uneasily. Thunder rolled across the mountains, and more than once, Clara dreamed of the cloaked figures who had attacked them, eyes like coals, voices like the rustle of ash. At dawn they departed, following the course of a narrow river that shimmered oddly, its surface wreathed in blue flame, though the water itself was icy. The path wound through gorges and caves, through forests of black pine where silence lay heavy as a spell. By midday they reached a stone bridge spanning the stream. The air grew thick with magic. The ground itself seemed to hum, alive with unseen currents. Scorpius knelt by the riverbank, tracing runes in the mud with his wand. It's here. This is the convergence of ley lines. Where the fire below meets the waters above, the grotto must lie beyond that ridge. Clara felt the pull too, like a heartbeat beneath her feet. Then we're close. They climbed until the path narrowed into a ledge carved by time. A wind rose, fierce and bitter, carrying with it a faint metallic scent. And then they saw it, the entrance to the grotto of glass. It was not a cave in the ordinary sense. The mouth of it gleamed like a frozen wave, translucent and shimmering with all the colors of dawn. When Clara approached, her reflection wavered upon its surface, yet her reflection's eyes seemed not to match her own. Neville drew his wand. Flamel was a master of illusion. Be wary. Scorpius whispered an incantation, and the glass rippled. The air trembled with a low harmonic tone, and then the barrier melted away, revealing a tunnel descending into pale light. They stepped inside. The walls glowed faintly like moonlight trapped in crystal. Patterns of runes spiraled down the passage, telling stories and pictures. A man and woman forging a red stone, a serpent devouring its own tail, a sun split in two. The legend of the twin stones, Scorpius murmured, eyes alight. He recorded it here, the making and the sundering. They moved deeper until the tunnel opened into a vast chamber. At its center stood a pool of still water, and above it hovered a single shard of crimson crystal, spinning slowly in the air. Its light filled the chamber with a soft, pulsating glow. Clara's breath caught. Is that... Neville shook his head. No, not the stone itself, but a fragment, a piece of the first, perhaps. Scorpius circled the pool, studying the runes that lined its edge. Flamel split the original stone when he destroyed it. This fragment anchors the protection that seals the second one. If we touch it carelessly, we could awaken its twin. Clara knelt, gazing into the reflection that wavered on the surface of the water. For a heartbeat, she saw not herself, but Nicholas Flamel, his kindly face lined with centuries of wisdom, his eyes bright with both sorrow and hope. Then the vision vanished. From the shadows beyond the chamber came a sound, the faint drip of water, a soft footstep, and a whisper that turned her blood to ice. "You have found it for us." They spun around. The leader of the Ashen Circle stood at the entrance, flanked by 6 cloaked figures. His hood fell back, revealing a gaunt face gray as weathered stone, his eyes burning with the faint red light of corrupted alchemy. "Welcome, seekers of truth," he said, voice like cracked glass. "I am Malvernus, the last of Flamel's disciples and the rightful heir to his creation." Neville raised his wand. "You twist his name with your lies." Malvernus smiled faintly. "Flamel was a fool. He sought to hide what the world was meant to embrace. The stone was never meant to die, and with the second we shall restore it. Immortality will belong to all who dare to claim it." Scorpius stepped forward, fury in his voice. "You don't understand. The twin was forged to end life, not preserve it." "Precisely," said Malvernus. "One cannot command life without mastering death. You will help me unlock it." With a flick of his wand, invisible cords lashed around Scorpius, binding his arms. The young alchemist cried out. As he was dragged toward the pool, Clara lunged forward, but 2 of the circle seized her. She struggled, but the air grew heavy, the chamber itself vibrating with restrained magic. Neville shouted a spell shattering one captor's wand, but the next moment a bolt of red light struck him square in the chest. He fell, motionless. "Stop!" Clara cried. "You'll destroy us all!" Malvernus ignored her. He held the crimson shard aloft, chanting in a tongue older than Latin. The pool began to boil, its light growing brighter, red and gold weaving together in a violent dance. Scorpius gasped, his voice barely audible. "Clara, the runes break the circle." Her eyes darted to the floor. The runes carved around the pool's edge formed a barrier of containment. If she could disrupt it, the spell might collapse before reaching full strength. Summoning all her courage, she wrenched free an arm and hurled her wand toward the ground. Fractura sigillum. The runes blazed white, then shattered like glass. A scream tore through the chamber as the spell rebounded upon itself. The pool erupted, sending waves of molten light crashing into the walls. The Ashen Circle dissolved in flashes of flame and smoke. Malvernus staggered backward, his face twisted in horror. "No, the stone is mine!" But the crimson shard cracked down the middle, splitting with a sound like thunder. Its glow flared once more, then extinguished. Silence fell. The air smelled of ozone and dust. Clara crawled toward Neville, trembling. He stirred weakly, eyes fluttering open. "Did you stop it?" She looked toward the pool. The water was gone. Only the fractured shard remained, dark and lifeless. "Yes," she whispered. "For now." But as she lifted the shard, a faint warmth pulsed in its depths. Not gone, merely sleeping. And somewhere beyond the mountains, hidden in the folds of shadow, something stirred. A whispering voice carried on the wind, promising that the secret of the twin stones was not yet finished. And so, with Scorpius wounded, Neville weary, and the world trembling on the edge of discovery, Clara Dunthorne understood that the true test had only just begun. The mountain winds roared through the shattered entrance of the grotto, sweeping the smell of ozone and burnt stone into the cold night. Clara stood at its threshold, her breath pale against the darkness, the fractured shard of crimson clutched in her trembling hand. The world seemed eerily still after the fury that had shaken the earth only moments before. Behind her, Neville knelt beside Scorpius, who lay pale and bloodied against the cavern wall. The young alchemist's robes were scorched, his wand split clean in two, yet his gray eyes still burned with the fierce light of determination. "Hold still," Neville muttered, running his wand over the wound on Scorpius's shoulder. Episci. A faint green glow spread, easing the bleeding, though it could not mend all that was broken. Scorpius managed a weak grin. "You're as good with healing charms as you were with mandrakes, Professor." Neville gave a soft snort. "Don't flatter me, lad. I'd rather be back at Hogwarts with a greenhouse full of venomous tentacula than here with cursed stones and mad alchemists." Clara knelt beside them, brushing soot from her face. "We can't stay," she said. "The cave's collapsing. Whatever happened here, it's not done." Even as she spoke, the ground trembled beneath their feet. The walls of crystal groaned and cracked, sending showers of glass-like shards cascading around them. The pool was gone, but the shattered runes pulsed faintly as though trying to rebuild themselves. Scorpius forced himself upright. "Malvernus? He's gone, isn't he?" Clara shook her head. "The explosion threw him into the shadows. I didn't see a body." Neville looked grim. "Then assume he lives. Wizards like that never die easily." They fled the grotto just as a final rumble sent the tunnel collapsing behind them. Dust and fragments of light burst into the open air, fading into the pale dawn. When they finally stopped at the foot of the ridge, they could see the valley stretching before them, calm, untroubled, as though the mountain had swallowed its secrets whole. For a long while, none of them spoke. Only the wind filled the silence, whispering through the pine trees. Scorpius broke it at last. "You said the stone was made to end immortality. What if that's not all it does?" Clara glanced at the shard. Its surface had dulled to black, but faint veins of red light still throbbed within like the pulse of a sleeping heart. "I don't know. But we can't let it fall into the wrong hands again. Malvernus wanted to restore the stone. He might still try." Neville nodded. "Then our course is clear. We take it to safety. The Ministry can't know, not yet. There are too many who'd be tempted." "Where then?" Clara asked. Neville's eyes lifted toward the horizon, where dawn painted the clouds in gold. "Hogwarts. The castle has guarded darker things and kept them from worse men. If there's any place in the world strong enough to contain it, it's there." And so their journey turned northward once more. The days that followed were long and haunted. They traveled by night, avoiding the main roads and using enchanted disguises to slip through wizarding towns. News spread quickly through magical circles. A tremor in the Pyrenees, strange lights seen in the skies, whispers that the Ashen Circle had returned. At a hidden safe house near Lyon, Clara awoke one evening to find Scorpius studying the shard by wand light. Its faint glow danced across his face, making his eyes appear ancient. "You shouldn't touch it," she said softly. He didn't look up. "I can't help it. It's alive somehow." "Do you feel it too?" She hesitated. "Sometimes, when I hold it, it feels as though it's listening." "Exactly." He looked at her then, his voice hushed but urgent. "Flamel created the second stone to undo the first, yes. But maybe he never meant for it to be destroyed. Maybe he meant for it to balance life and death, not end either." Clara frowned. "That's dangerous thinking." "Perhaps. But what if that's the truth of it?" Scorpius turned to the shard, and for an instant it flared crimson, casting their shadows large upon the walls. Flamel understood creation and destruction as twins. If we destroy this shard, the balance could collapse. Who knows what would happen to the remnants of the first stone, or to the magic it left behind? Before Clara could answer, Neville's voice came from the doorway. Enough of that, both of you. Put it away. Scorpius sighed, but obeyed, sealing the shard inside a small, rune-carved box. We leave at first light, Neville said. If Malvern survived, he'll come after us, and something tells me he won't be alone. He was right. The following evening, as they crossed into the English Channel by enchanted boat, the sea turned violent, waves rose higher than masts, and the air grew bitter cold. From the fog emerged dark shapes, 6, maybe 7, riding the wind on broomsticks. The Ashen Circle had found them. Spells cracked through the air like thunder. Bolts of red and green lit the fog. Neville shouted a shield charm that deflected one curse, but another struck the side of the boat, splintering its hull. "Hold on!" Clara cried, steering toward a shimmer of light that marked the wards of the English coast. Scorpius turned and fired a streak of blue flame that sent one pursuer spiraling into the sea. Another darted close, wand raised, but before he could cast, Neville struck him full in the chest with a blasting curse that sent his broom spinning away into the mist. Then a voice cut through the storm, cold, sharp, unmistakable. "Dunthorne, Malvernus." He hovered above them, cloak billowing like smoke, wand aglow with unnatural fire. His face was pale as bone, his eyes lit with feverish hunger. "The stone belongs to me," he roared. Clara shouted back, "It was never yours." Malvernus raised his wand, chanting words that made the air itself tremble. Lightning arced across the sky, striking the sea in molten bursts. The waters boiled where the bolts fell, and the smell of burnt salt filled the air. Scorpius, panting, clutched the rune box to his chest. "Clara, the shard, it's reacting." Indeed, the box shook violently, its runes flaring bright red. The shard's magic was answering Malvernus's power, resonating like a note of the same song. "Throw it into the sea," Neville shouted. "End it before it's too late." But Clara hesitated. Something inside her screamed against the thought, as though the shard itself were pleading for life. The light pulsed faster, and suddenly a voice, soft, sorrowful, whispered within her mind, "Do not unmake me, for in my end lies the key." Her eyes widened. "It's speaking." "What?" Scorpius gasped. "Flamel's magic. It's alive." Malvernus descended, fury twisting his face. "Give it to me!" Clara raised her wand, light blazing from its tip. "Never!" With a cry, she unleashed a surge of power she didn't know she possessed. The air exploded in white brilliance. Malvern screamed, his spell rebounding upon him, and the storm itself seemed to split apart. When the light faded, he was gone. Only the echo of his laughter lingered over the waves. Their boat drifted in silence beneath a clearing sky. Neville slumped, exhausted, while Scorpius stared into the rune box, which now lay still once more. "What did it say to you?" he whispered. Clara looked out toward the dawn breaking over England. "It said the end isn't destruction, it's truth." And as the first rays of sunlight touched the water, she felt a strange certainty settle within her heart. The journey was not over. Flamel's true secret had yet to be revealed, and somewhere deep beneath the veil between life and death, the twin stones still waited to meet once more. The waters of the channel gleamed like molten glass as dawn spread across the horizon. The storm had passed, leaving behind a heavy, enchanted silence. Their small boat drifted into calmer seas, its sails torn but still holding wind. Clara sat at the bow, the rune-carved box resting across her knees. She could feel the faint thrum of the shard inside, a heartbeat not of flesh but of ancient magic. Neville stood beside her, his wand raised, as he murmured protective charms around the craft. The air shimmered faintly, sealing them against pursuit. Scorpius, still pale from his wounds, leaned against the mast and stared toward the misty outline of the English coast. "So it spoke to you," he said quietly, voice raw from the salt air. Clara nodded. "Just a whisper," it said. "In my end lies the key." Neville frowned. "Flamel's words, perhaps. But what key?" "I don't know," she said, her voice low. "Yet I feel as though it knows me. It's as if the stone recognizes whoever seeks it." Scorpius gave a half smile. "Or perhaps it simply remembers anyone foolish enough to touch it?" Neville gave him a stern look, but Clara's gaze stayed fixed on the horizon. There was a tension in her chest, a sense that something vast and unseen was shifting, as though the world itself was holding its breath. By midday they reached the cliffs of Dover and slipped quietly ashore. No one watched their arrival. The ministry's patrols were far away, and the beach was nothing but wind and gulls. Neville summoned an enchanted carriage, and within minutes they were flying north through the cloudy English sky. Hogwarts awaited. They arrived at twilight. The castle rose from the mist like a dream remembered, its towers gilded by the last light of day. The black lake shimmered darkly below, and the forbidden forest whispered beyond. For Clara, who had never walked its halls before, it felt less like a school and more like a living relic, a place where centuries of secrets slept within stone. Professor Longbottom's return did not go unnoticed. House elves greeted them at the gate with shy bows, and the portraits along the entrance hall stirred awake, whispering among themselves, "Welcome home." "Head of herbology," murmured one of the older portraits, a witch with a high collar and a knowing smile. "You've brought guests, I see." "Important business," Neville replied shortly, though his eyes softened as they swept the familiar corridors. "Best keep this quiet." They were led to his office, a room filled with the scent of earth and leaves, where vines coiled lazily along the windows. Clara set the rune box upon his desk, its glow faint beneath the lantern light. Neville drew the curtains and sealed the door with a charm. "All right, let's see what we're dealing with." When Clara lifted the lid, the shard gleamed brighter than before, as if awakened by its new surroundings. Its light spilled across the stone walls, and the temperature in the room dropped sharply. Scorpius stepped closer, his breath fogging in the air. "It's responding to the wards. Hogwarts was built on powerful foundations, the very lines of the earth. It's feeding on that magic." Neville frowned. "Can it be contained?" "Perhaps," Scorpius said, "but not forever. It's seeking something. A counterpart, maybe the remnants of the first stone." Clara looked up sharply. "You think the first still exists?" Scorpius hesitated. "Destroyed, yes, but its essence, energy like that doesn't simply vanish. It disperses, waiting to be called again." A knock broke their silence. Neville moved toward the door, wand raised. "Who is it?" A young voice answered, nervous but familiar. "Professor, it's Headmistress Chang. The wards recorded an unusual surge in magical energy. She sent me to check." Neville sighed and unbarred the door. A tall witch entered, Cho Chang, graceful as ever, her dark eyes keen. Her robes bore the silver crest of Ravenclaw. "So it's true," she said quietly, gaze falling on the shard. "You've found what remains of Flamel's work." Clara inclined her head, and something far worse chasing it. Cho stepped closer, her expression grave. "There have been whispers in the north, a gathering near the ruins of Azkaban, shadows wearing the mark of ash. Your enemies may not be gone." "The Ashen Circle," Neville said. "They're rebuilding." Cho's gaze flicked between them. "Then Hogwarts is no longer safe. Its wards can protect you for a time, but not if they find the stone's trail." Clara's hand tightened around the box. "Then we must move it again. But where?" Cho studied her for a long moment before replying. "There is a place even Hogwarts cannot reach, a sanctuary older than the Ministry itself, the Sanctum of Avalon, hidden beneath the roots of the island. It was said to hold the relics of the first Magi. Only those chosen by fate can pass its gates." Scorpius's eyes gleamed with wonder. "Avalon, the cradle of all wizard kind," Cho nodded. "It is said that Flamel visited there once, long before his fame. If any truth remains about his creations, it lies there." Neville exhaled slowly. "Then Avalon it is." But even as he spoke, a sudden tremor shook the walls. The torches flickered. From somewhere deep within the castle came a distant, thunderous crack. "What in Merlin's name?" Neville started, but Cho's eyes went wide. "The wards!" she cried. "Someone's breached them." They rushed to the window. Over the lake, black shapes moved, figures gliding upon broomsticks, their cloaks trailing smoke. The Ashen Circle had come to Hogwarts. "Too soon," Neville muttered, grabbing his wand. "They followed the stone's resonance." Scorpius opened the rune box, the shard pulsing wildly now, reacting to the intruding magic. "It's calling them," he said grimly, "like a beacon." Clara's heart pounded. "Then we have to get it away from the castle. If they reach the grounds..." Neville was already moving. "The old catacombs beneath the herbology greenhouses. There's a hidden tunnel that leads to the forest's edge. Go. I'll hold them back." "Professor, go!" Clara hesitated only a second before obeying. She seized the box, and together with Scorpius and Cho, she dashed down the stone corridors as the sounds of battle erupted above them. The castle itself seemed to awaken, staircases shifting, suits of armor clanking to life. They reached the greenhouses just as curses lit the sky beyond the courtyard. Cho blasted open a trapdoor concealed beneath a row of mandrakes. A narrow passage yawned below. "Down!" she commanded. They descended into darkness. Roots hung like serpents from the ceiling, and faint runes glimmered on the walls. The air smelled of damp earth and ancient magic. Behind them the sounds of combat echoed, Neville's voice, spells colliding in bursts of light, then a deeper sound, a roar, not human. Something vast had entered the fray. Scorpius looked back uneasily. "He can't hold them forever." Clara pressed onward, her wand lighting the path. "He'll hold as long as he must." At last, the tunnel opened into the edge of the forbidden forest. Moonlight filtered through twisted branches, and the night was thick with the cries of unseen creatures. Cho pointed toward the east. "There, beyond the lake's far shore, lies the standing stone that marks the way to Avalon. If we reach it before dawn, the path will open." Clara nodded, clutching the rune box close. But as they moved into the shadowed woods, a cold wind swept through the trees, and from the darkness came a voice she knew too well. "You run, yet you cannot hide." Malvernis stepped into the clearing, his robes torn, his face half burned by the magic of the grotto, but alive, more terrible than before. His eyes glowed with crimson light. "The stone calls to me," he whispered, "and through it, to the world beyond death. You cannot escape destiny, Miss Dunthorne." Clara raised her wand. "Neither can you." And in the silence that followed, the forest itself seemed to hold its breath before the storm of spells began anew. The forest erupted in flame and shadow. Malvernis's first curse struck the earth at Clara's feet, exploding in a shower of sparks that sent her and Scorpius tumbling behind a fallen tree. Cho Chang moved like lightning, her wand carving silver arcs through the air as she threw up a shimmering shield. The red light of the enemy's spells splashed across it, bursting into harmless embers that fell like rain. "Run!" she cried to Clara. "Take the shard and go." But Clara could not leave. The rune box pulsed hot against her chest, as though the shard within were alive with fury. Each pulse echoed through her ribs, through her magic, through her very bones. It whispered in her mind, "He must not touch me." Malvernis advanced, his cloak trailing smoke. The magic around him distorted the air, bending light and twisting the branches into shapes that clawed at the night. His wand burned crimson. "You cannot win," he said, voice calm, cold as stone. "I have tasted eternity once before. You will not deny me again." Clara rose to meet his gaze. "Flamel denied you. I will finish what he began." "Flamel was weak," Malvernis snarled. "He feared his own creation. But I have no fear. Death itself is a servant of those who command the stone." Cho's shield faltered under the weight of his spell, cracking like glass. She stumbled back, gasping, as Malvernis hurled another curse. Scorpius leapt forward, wand outstretched. Incendio magna. A torrent of blue flame roared from his wand, engulfing Malvernis. But the dark wizard merely raised his arm, and the fire bent around him, twisting into a serpentine coil that turned back upon its caster. It struck Scorpius square in the chest and hurled him against a tree. "Scorpius!" Clara screamed, but there was no time to reach him. Malvernis's eyes burned with triumph as he strode forward, his hand outstretched. "The shard belongs to me." Clara drew upon every ounce of strength left in her and shouted, "Protego totalis." A dome of light sprang up around her, shimmering like a crystal bubble. Malvernis's spells broke against it, hissing and dying in bursts of sparks. Yet with every strike the shield dimmed. She could feel her power waning, her breath shallow, her magic burning at both ends. "Enough games!" Malvernis roared. With a wave of his wand, he sent a surge of raw magic crashing into her barrier. The ground quaked. The air split with thunder. Clara fell to her knees as the shield shattered, and the rune box flew from her grasp. Malvernis caught it midair. He smiled, a terrible, hollow smile. At last, he opened the box. The shard rose into the air, blazing with crimson fire. The light filled the clearing, casting monstrous shadows through the trees. Malvernis stretched his arms wide, drinking in its power, his laughter echoing through the forest. But the laughter changed, turned to a scream. The light shifted from red to white, so bright it seared the night. Winds howled, tearing leaves and roots from the ground. The shard's voice, clear and fierce as thunder, filled the world. "You seek eternity through death, but I am not your servant. I am the balance, the reckoning, the flame that ends all hunger." Malvernis fell to his knees, clutching his head. His skin burned with runes of light, his veins glowing as the shard poured through him. "No!" he screamed. "I command you. "You command nothing," the voice replied. Then came a sound like glass breaking, not in the air, but in the fabric of reality itself. The light imploded, drawing inward, and when it vanished, Malvernus was gone. Only ashes remained, drifting through the clearing. Silence returned, heavy and unnatural. The forest seemed to sigh, its ancient heart appeased. Clara collapsed beside Scorpius, shaking. His pulse was weak, but he still breathed. Cho knelt beside them, wand trembling. "He's alive," she said. "Barely." Clara looked around. The rune box lay open, empty. The shard was gone. "Where is it?" Cho whispered. Clara turned toward the ashes, and there, amidst the smoldering leaves, she saw it. No longer red, but pale as moonlight. The shard floated inches above the ground, its edges soft, almost human in its glow. Without thinking, she reached for it. It came to her hand like a bird landing upon a branch. The moment her fingers closed around it, warmth flooded her veins. Not fire this time, but light, pure, steady, calm. "You are chosen," the voice murmured within her mind. "He sought dominion. You seek truth. My journey continues through you." The light sank into her palm, leaving behind a faint mark. 2 circles intertwined. Cho stepped back, awe on her face. "Clara." Neville's voice rang through the forest, then hoarse but unbroken. "Clara, over here." He limped from the trees, blood streaking his temple, his robes torn. Behind him, the last echoes of battle faded. The circle's gone. Most fled when the wards collapsed. "What happened here?" Clara looked down at her hand where the mark still glowed faintly. "Malvernus is dead. The shard chose me." Neville's eyes widened. "Chose you?" Before she could answer, a low hum filled the clearing. The mark flared once, then released a wave of soft golden light that spread through the forest like dawn. Every tree, every blade of grass shimmered for an instant as if waking from a long sleep. Scorpius stirred, opening his eyes. "It's over, then?" Clara met his gaze. "No. The shard said its journey continues. There's something it still wants us to find." Neville rubbed his beard thoughtfully. "Avalon," he murmured. "It must be. If the shard carries Flamel's will, it's leading us there." Cho nodded slowly. "The sanctum will only open to one the magic has marked. That's you now, Clara. Whatever truth Flamel hid, it's bound to your fate." Clara stared into the dark forest, feeling the hum of the shard in her veins. "Then we follow where it leads." As they made their way back toward the castle, the moon broke through the clouds, lighting their path in silver. Hogwarts loomed in the distance, its towers proud and unyielding. But Clara knew their journey would not end there. The night air was sharp, carrying with it the scent of ash and rain. She glanced once more at her palm, the intertwined circles gleaming faintly beneath her skin. A strange peace filled her, not victory, but purpose. Behind them, deep within the forbidden forest, the ashes of Malvernus stirred. For a moment they swirled into a faint shape, a shadow of a man, and then were scattered by the wind. But far beneath the earth, beyond light and breath, something vast and ancient turned its gaze upon the living world once more. A slumbering power, older than even Flamel's alchemy, had felt the shard awaken, and it too began to stir. The balance between life and death had been broken once before. Now it would be tested again. And Clara Dunthorne, Cursebreaker, bearer of the mark of the Twin Stones, would soon learn that every light casts a shadow, and that even truth comes at a cost. The days that followed passed like whispers in the corridors of Hogwarts. The The castle healed slowly after the battle. Windows repaired themselves with quiet shivers of glass. Scorched stones knitted back together, and the smell of smoke faded into the scent of wet earth and candles. Yet beneath its peace, unease stirred like a faint heartbeat. Word of the attack had spread. Rumors carried by portraits, murmured by ghosts. Some said Death Eaters had returned. Others whispered that an ancient power had awakened in the forbidden forest. Only a few knew the truth. In the quiet hours before dawn, Clara sat alone in the greenhouse, her hand glowing faintly with the intertwined circles that marked her bond to the shard. The rune pulsed gently, neither painful nor warm, simply alive, like a second pulse beneath her skin. The moonlight filtered through glass panes streaked with mist, casting pale ribbons of silver across rows of magical plants that swayed as if listening. She opened the rune box, now empty save for the faint shimmer of dust left behind by the shard's transformation. The air above it hummed faintly when she whispered a spell. A swirl of golden motes appeared, coalescing into an image. 2 stones, one crimson, one white, orbiting one another in endless balance. The twin stones, she thought, life and death, joined. The whisper came soft and distant as a memory. Seek the heart of Avalon. There lies the reckoning. The voice was neither male nor female, neither kind nor cruel. It simply was, ancient, steady, inevitable. She looked up as footsteps approached. Neville entered carrying a lantern that painted the plants an amber light. His limp was worse now, though he hid it behind a steady stride. "Still no rest?" he asked gently. Clara shook her head. "It won't let me. It keeps showing me images, a place surrounded by water, a tower half buried in roots. I think it's calling us." Neville set the lantern down beside her. "Then the sanctum of Avalon is real. I'd hoped the stories were only that." "What do you know of it?" she asked. "Only fragments," he admitted. "When Hogwarts was founded, the founders sought guidance from older powers, guardians of magic itself. They called that place Avalon, though few ever found it. It's said to exist between worlds, neither alive nor dead, hidden in the folds of magic that separate time." Clara smiled faintly. "That sounds impossible." Neville chuckled. "Most things worth doing are." Then his voice grew grave. "If Avalon is stirring, something else is too. The balance Flamel tried to protect may be shifting again. The shard chose you for a reason. But be wary, Clara. The stone's power is not bound by human understanding. If it tests you, it will not be gentle." She closed the box and met his gaze. "Then let it test me. I've seen what happens when men like Malvernus chase immortality. I won't let that happen again." Before he could reply, the greenhouse door burst open. Scorpius stumbled in, clutching a roll of parchment. His hair was disheveled, his eyes wide with feverish excitement. "I found it," he gasped. "The coordinates, the exact crossing point of the ley lines that lead to Avalon, they intersect beneath the Isle of Skye." Neville's brows rose. "The Sky Sanctuary?" "The same," said Scorpius, spreading the parchment across a table. Lines of glowing blue light crisscrossed the map of Britain, converging upon a single symbol etched near the coast, a circle surrounded by runes. "It's the place where the boundary between life and death is thinnest. The old Celts built stone circles there to honor it. But if my readings are correct, there's something deeper beneath the surface, a hidden vault. It matches every description of the sanctum." Clara felt the shard within her pulse faster. "Then that's where we go." Neville hesitated. And if it's a trap, the ashen circle may be gone, but others will come for what you carry. I can't ignore the call, Clara said quietly. It's part of me now. Scorpius grinned faintly. Then we'd better start packing. They left before sunset the next day. Cho remained behind to guard the castle, her wand never far from her hand. The trio took to the skies once more, riding enchanted brooms, northward over rolling hills and silver rivers. The wind howled in their ears, carrying the chill of early spring. As they flew, the land below grew wild and ancient. Villages gave way to heather-covered moors where standing stones loomed like sentinels of forgotten gods. By nightfall, the Isle of Skye rose before them, a rugged land of cliffs and mist, its coast carved by restless tides. They landed upon a high plateau overlooking the sea. The air was heavy with salt and the scent of peat fires from distant crofts. Stars shimmered in the deepening dark, and the moon hung low over the water. "There," said Scorpius, pointing toward a ring of standing stones half buried in moss. "That's the place. If Avalon exists anywhere in this world, it's beyond that circle." Clara approached slowly, her boots sinking into damp earth. The stones hummed softly as she neared, resonating with the mark upon her palm. Each one bore faint carvings, runic letters older than Hogwarts, older even than Merlin's tongue. Neville drew his wand. "Stay close. Magic this old doesn't forgive mistakes." She stepped into the circle. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the air trembled. The sea wind died. The stars above shimmered and rearranged themselves into a spiral. The ground beneath her feet rippled like water. Light burst from the stones, joining above her head in a single column that pierced the sky. "Clara!" Scorpius shouted. "What's happening?" She couldn't answer. The world around her dissolved into brilliance. For a heartbeat, she felt herself falling, not through space, but through memory. Voices whispered all around her, Flamel's, Dumbledore's, nameless others who had once sought truth in alchemy and found only burden. Then she stood upon a vast plain of silver mist. The air shimmered with echoes of light and song. Before her rose a tower woven from living roots and crystal, its spire vanishing into the clouds. Water surrounded it on all sides, calm as glass. "The sanctum of Avalon," she whispered. Behind her, Neville and Scorpius appeared, dazed but unharmed. "By Merlin," Scorpius breathed. "It's real." They crossed a bridge of light toward the tower. The moment Clara's marked hand touched its door, the runes flared and parted, revealing a chamber filled with floating orbs of flame. In the center stood a pedestal of stone, and upon it, the twin to the shard she bore, still whole, still red, pulsing with life. Neville's voice was barely a whisper. The Philosopher's Stone. But as they stepped closer, a shadow moved across the room. A tall figure cloaked in white turned toward them, his eyes ageless, filled with both sorrow and light. "You should not have come," said Nicolas Flamel. The world seemed to hold its breath. Clara stared, unable to speak. "You're dead," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "Death and life are not so different here. You stand within the heart of both." The shard within her hand glowed fiercely, answering his presence. Flamel regarded her with something like pity. "The balance has been broken once again. The stone that ends and the stone that begins must soon become one, or both will consume the world." Neville stepped forward. "Then teach us how to restore it." Flamel's eyes darkened. "To restore it, one must give up what the stones were made to preserve." Scorpius frowned. "Immortality?" "No," said Flamel softly. life itself. The chamber's flames flickered and shadows began to creep along the floor, twisting into shapes that whispered with the voices of the dead. The air grew heavy. Clara felt the shard in her hand grow hot, trembling like a living thing yearning to merge with its twin. Flamel's gaze fixed upon her. The stones remember their maker, but now they answer to you. The choice will be yours, Clara Dunthorne. Save the balance or save yourself. And before she could reply, the shadows rose and the world turned to fire. The fire came not as flame, but as light, endless, blinding, and filled with the sound of 1,000 rushing voices. The chamber of Avalon vanished in a surge of brilliance. Clara threw her arm before her eyes. Yet even through closed lids, the light seared her vision. She felt herself pulled upward, weightless, as if the very air had become a current, dragging her into the heart of the storm. Then suddenly, silence. When the glare faded, she stood upon a vast expanse of white stone beneath a sky that shimmered with pale gold. Towers rose around her, graceful and translucent, their spires crowned with orbs of floating flame. Between them drifted shapes like spirits, faint, luminous echoes of the dead. Neville and Scorpius stood nearby, both dazed but unharmed. Flamel was gone. Only his voice lingered, whispering across the wind. You stand where the veil is thinnest between all that has been and all that may yet be. Welcome to the heart of Avalon. Clara steadied herself, her pulse hammering. The shard in her hand glowed faintly, its light now silver instead of red. Ahead of her, on the great dais at the center of the courtyard, lay the second stone, Flamel's original creation, flawless and complete. It pulsed like a heart. Scorpius took a step forward, wonder in his voice. So this is what he made to defy death itself. Neville's expression was grave, and what it cost him to destroy it. Clara felt a deep pull toward the stone, a resonance within her that answered its call. It's calling me, she said softly. It may not want you, Scorpius warned. It may need you. Neville touched her shoulder. Remember what Flamel said. The stones seek balance. You carry one half. The other waits for you. But if they join... I know, she said, the balance may end. She walked slowly toward the dais. The closer she came, the louder the voices grew. Not words, but echoes, 1,000 fragments of thought and memory. She saw flashes within the light. Flamel forging the stone with trembling hands, Dumbledore sealing it away, Harry Potter standing before it in the mirror of Arist, choosing sacrifice over power. Each vision passed through her like a tide. At last she stood before it. The stone hovered above its pedestal, radiant yet still. She raised her marked hand and the silver shard pulsed in response. The two lights reached for one another. Wait, Neville shouted. If they merge, we don't know what will happen. Clara turned to him, her face calm, though her heart thundered. If I don't, the balance remains broken. The world will feel the fracture soon. Life without death, death without end. Flamel's voice returned, low and distant. Every alchemist must face their own transmutation. The stone is not a weapon nor a gift. It is a mirror. What it becomes depends on the heart that wields it. Clara took a breath and touched the stone. The world dissolved. She stood in darkness. Not the kind of dark that came from absence, but the kind filled with stars, billions of them suspended in endless black. A figure appeared before her, woven of light and memory. Nicolas Flamel, she whispered. The old alchemist inclined his head. Or what remains of him. This is the realm within the stones, a place outside time. You have crossed where few mortals ever dared. Why me? She asked. Why did it choose me? Because you seek truth, not power, he said. Because you would rather bear a burden than cast it upon others. The stones know the hearts of men. They seek the one who can unite them without succumbing to their hunger. Clara felt the weight of his words settle upon her. And if I fail, then death and life will war forever. The living will fade without dying, and the dead will rise without life. Magic itself will unravel. His image flickered. The stones remember pain. They were born from my fear, the fear of losing what I loved. You must give what I could not. What must I give? Flamel smiled sadly. Yourself. The stars dimmed, and the darkness folded in upon her. When she opened her eyes again, she was back in the chamber. The stone glowed brighter now, almost white. Scorpius and Neville stood frozen at the edge of the dais, their forms wavering as if trapped behind glass. The shard in her hand lifted of its own accord, merging with the greater stone. A surge of power rushed through her, lifting her from the ground. Light poured from her eyes and mouth, and she felt the world unravel around her, the veil between the living and the dead tearing open. Across the room, shadows spilled forth, taking human shapes. Faces formed from smoke and memory. Some she knew, others lost to time. Among them, one face drew her breath short, her father's, who had died when she was a child. Clara, the shade whispered, let go. You cannot carry both worlds. Tears burned her eyes. I can fix this, she said. I have to. The shade smiled, sorrowful. Then you will never return. Neville's voice pierced the chaos. Clara, stop! You'll destroy yourself. She could barely hear him. The magic roared through her, too vast, too bright. Yet beneath it all was a steady rhythm, the same heartbeat she'd felt since the shard first chose her. Balance. The stone's light expanded, touching both her mark and her heart. She understood then that the stones did not seek to rule death or life. They sought unity, they sought release. With trembling hands, she whispered, finite. The word echoed like thunder. The twin lights merged completely, flaring brighter than the sun, and then shattered into dust that rained down like golden snow. The power left her in an instant. She collapsed upon the dais, gasping, the mark upon her hand fading to a faint scar. When the brilliance dimmed, the Philosopher's stone was gone. Only a single tear-shaped gem lay where it had been, dull and gray. Scorpius rushed to her side. Clara, are you... She managed a weak smile. It's done. They're one now. And they're gone. Neville knelt beside her, awe and relief written across his face. What did you do? I didn't destroy them, she said softly. I released them. The stones were never meant to be eternal. They were meant to teach that nothing should be. Outside the chamber, the air shifted. The Tower of Avalon began to fade, its walls turning to mist. The plane of silver light dissolved into horizonless white. Flamel's voice came one last time, gentle as a sigh. You have done what even I could not. The world will remember balance, though it will forget your name. Such is the way of true alchemy. Then he was gone. The three of them awoke upon the moors of sky. Dawn burned gold over the sea. The standing stones stood silent and still, their magic spent. Scorpius rubbed his eyes, dazed. Was it all real? Neville gazed at the rising sun. Real enough, look at her hand. Clara's palm bore no mark now, only a faint shimmer when the light touched it. She felt light, not empty but free, as though something vast had finally released its hold. What happens now? She asked. Neville smiled. Now we go home." She nodded, though as she looked out across the water, she sensed that Avalon still lingered somewhere just beyond sight, a hidden heartbeat beneath the world. The wind shifted, carrying with it a whisper, balance restored. Clara closed her eyes, letting the sound of the waves wash through her. The philosopher's stone was gone, its truth sealed forever. But its lesson remained. Immortality was never the gift of life, only its shadow. And as the first light of day warmed her face, she knew that the age of the stones had ended at last, and a new one, fragile but pure, had begun. The journey back to Hogwarts was a quiet one. The wind that carried them south seemed gentler now. The skies washed clean of storm and fire. Clara rode at the front, her eyes fixed on the horizon, though her thoughts were far beyond the clouds. The mark that had once burned upon her hand was gone, but sometimes she thought she still felt its echo, a phantom warmth that pulsed with each beat of her heart. The world felt different, lighter, somehow. The air held a strange stillness, as if nature itself were pausing to draw breath after a long, unspoken tension. She wondered whether the others could feel it too. Scorpius flew beside her, pale and weary but alive. His robes were torn and his eyes shadowed, yet there was a spark of wonder still flickering within them. "It's strange," he said over the wind. "Everything looks the same, and yet it doesn't. As if the world's been mended and no one but us knows it." Clara smiled faintly. "That's how it should be. Magic fixes quietly. It doesn't need applause." Neville, flying a few yards behind, called out, "Let's hope it stays that way. Merlin knows the Ministry would make a right mess of it if they ever learned what happened." They all laughed softly at that, an exhausted, breathless kind of laughter that came from relief rather than joy. By the time the spires of Hogwarts appeared, night had fallen once more. The castle stood proud and silent, its windows aglow with warm light. Smoke curled from chimneys. The lake mirrored the moon. It looked unchanged, untouched by the chaos that had unfolded mere days before. They landed in the courtyard, greeted by Cho Chang and a handful of aurors sent from London. Their wands flickered nervously, though Cho's face softened when she saw Neville. "You're alive," she breathed, stepping forward. Neville smiled faintly. "Just barely. How fares the castle?" "Peaceful," she said. "The wards are holding strong again. Whatever dark force touched them has gone." Her gaze moved to Clara. "And the stone?" Clara hesitated, then reached into her cloak. From within, she drew a small, tear-shaped gem, gray and dull, without the faintest hint of light. It looked ordinary, lifeless. Yet in the moonlight, it shimmered once, almost imperceptibly, before settling into stillness again. "It's over," she said simply. Cho studied it for a long moment. "You're sure?" "Yes. The stones are gone. Only this remains, a memory of what was." Neville gave a weary nod. "Then it's done." They said little more that night. The aurors departed before dawn, satisfied that no threat remained. The castle returned to its rhythm, the clang of bells, the laughter of students, the whispers of books turning in the library. Yet for Clara, sleep came only in fragments. When she dreamed, she saw Avalon, the silver plain, the Tower of Roots, and Flamel's kind, weary face fading into the mist. His final words echoed always, "The world will remember balance, though it will forget your name." She awoke before sunrise each morning, walking the quiet corridors where portraits dozed and torches burned low, Sometimes she thought she heard faint footsteps beside her, as though invisible company kept pace through the long stone halls. Neville tried to convince her to rest. Scorpius buried himself in research, filling notebooks with equations and sketches of runes, desperate to understand the final merging of the stones. "It defies every known principle of alchemy," he muttered one evening in the library. "Creation without destruction. Transmutation through surrender. It shouldn't be possible," Clara smiled, "and yet it happened." He looked up at her then, eyes wide with the kind of awe that only true scholars possess. "You've rewritten history, Clara. Flamel would have called it the Great Resolution, the end of the endless search." She said nothing. History, she knew, would forget. That was its mercy. Weeks passed. Spring crept over the highlands, softening the cold edges of winter. The lake thawed, and the first flowers pushed through the soil around Hagrid's old hut. Life at Hogwarts returned to its rhythm of lessons, laughter, and the occasional prank gone awry. But one night, as Clara stood by the astronomy tower, she felt a sudden chill. The stars above flickered, dimming for an instant before flaring bright again. A wind rose, sharp and metallic, carrying whispers that brushed her ear like a forgotten breath. "Balance restored," it said, the same voice she had heard in Avalon, but now tinged with warning. She turned sharply, wand raised, but saw nothing, only the dark expanse of sky stretching over the lake. Still, she could not shake the feeling that something stirred beyond the veil. Magic as old as the stones did not vanish so easily. It shifted, changed, slept. She had released the stones, not destroyed them, and magic always demanded balance. If the light had been freed, so too would the shadow seek its place. She returned to her chambers, restless. There she found Neville waiting, seated by the fire. "You felt it too," he said without looking up. Clara nodded. "A ripple," he sighed, rubbing his temples. "Magic like that doesn't simply fade, Clara. Even Flamel's wisdom couldn't change that truth. The world will feel its echo for generations. Perhaps that's the balance. Light and dark trading places forever." She stared into the flames. "Then our work isn't finished." "No," he agreed softly. "But for now, let it rest. We've done what we could." She rose to leave, but he stopped her with a gentle hand on her arm. "You did more than anyone since the founders themselves. Be proud of that." Her eyes softened. "I'm not proud, Professor. Just grateful to be alive." He smiled faintly. "That's pride enough." Summer came, golden and slow. When the term ended, Clara prepared to leave. Scorpius was already gone, summoned to Paris by the Alchemical Society, who demanded he explain the strange energies detected in their instruments. Neville would remain at Hogwarts, tending his beloved plants and teaching another generation of young witches and wizards to respect what grew quietly in the soil. On the morning of her departure, Cho met her at the gate. "You're certain you don't wish to stay?" she asked. "I've done what I came to do," Clara said, "and it's time to see what lies beyond." Cho glanced at the dull gem in her hand. "What will you do with it?" Clara smiled faintly. "Hide it? Or perhaps let it hide itself?" The headmistress's eyes lingered on her for a moment, then she nodded. "May the balance watch over you." "And you?" Clara said, stepping beyond the gates. The road stretched before her, winding through the green valleys of Scotland, bright beneath the morning sun. She did not look back. When night came, she camped beside a small stream, the air alive with crickets and the rustle of leaves. She drew the gray gem from her pocket, holding it up to the firelight. For the first time, she noticed a faint shimmer deep within it. A pulse so subtle it could have been her imagination. She smiled and whispered, "Rest now." The light flickered once, then went still. As she lay beneath the stars, sleep claimed her at last. In her dreams, she walked again through the silver fields of Avalon, where the wind carried not voices but music, a soft harmony between life and death, echoing forever across the ages. And far away, deep in the earth, where magic sleeps, two intertwined circles glowed faintly once more, a promise that balance endures even in silence. Summer mellowed into autumn, and the world seemed at peace once more. Yet for Clara Dunthorne, peace had become a restless companion. She wandered the breadth of Britain as the leaves turned gold, tracing old ruins and forgotten roads where traces of ancient magic still lingered. Though she told none her purpose, she carried always in her satchel the dull gray gem, the last remnant of the Philosopher's Stone. It lay silent most days, cold as river rock, but sometimes when the wind turned strange or the moon rose red, it pulsed faintly in her palm, as if to remind her that balance never truly sleeps. Her journey took her first to Glastonbury, where legends said Avalon's mists still brushed the mortal world. She climbed the tor beneath a sky heavy with cloud, the bell tower standing black against the setting sun. The air there hummed faintly, and though she knew it was likely only the whisper of the wind through old stone, it carried words that made her pause. The gate is closed, but the watch continues. She left an offering of wild thyme and silver dust as the old rites prescribed and moved on. Everywhere she went, she found small disturbances. Rivers running backward for a single night, stones rearranging themselves into circles, dreams shared by strangers across miles. None harmful, none lasting, but all signs that magic was reshaping itself after what had been lost. It was not dangerous yet, but she knew it could become so if left unchecked. By the time she reached the cliffs of Cornwall, the weather had turned sharp and cold. The sea thundered far below, and gulls wheeled over the white foam. She made her camp near the ruins of Tintagel, the place once said to have known both kings and sorcerers. In the moonlight, the castle walls shimmered faintly, as though memories of the past still walked their battlements. That night, she dreamed. She stood again before the twin stones, though now they were whole and shining. Around her, Avalon stretched endless and bright, but something had changed. The tower that had once risen at the heart of the plain now lay in ruin, its spire broken, its light dimmed. From the shadows emerged a figure she knew, Nicholas Flamel, or the echo of him. His robes were simple, his face serene, yet there was sorrow in his eyes. "You carry the last spark," he said. Clara looked down. The gem in her palm was glowing again, faintly but alive. "I thought it was over," she whispered. "Balance is never still," said Flamel. "It moves as the tide does. You released the stones, yes, but in doing so you set their essence free. Magic now flows as it did in the first days, wild and unbound. It will choose new vessels, new hearts. You must be the guide who keeps it from ruin." "I'm only one witch," she said. "The world is vast." Flamel smiled gently. "Then walk it well." He raised a hand and light poured from his palm. "Beware, Clara Dunthorne. Not all who seek balance seek harmony. Some crave its undoing. Where there is creation, destruction will always follow. Remember that. The vision faded, and she woke with a start to find the fire burned low and the sea wind cold upon her face. The gem lay in her open hand, glowing faintly once more. By dawn, she had made her decision. Weeks later, word of strange disturbances reached her ears. In the north, a village had lost all color for 3 days. The people said even the sunlight turned gray. In London, a fountain near the Ministry of Magic ran with molten gold until the aurors sealed it. These were echoes, Clara knew, ripples from the broken stones as their energy found new channels through the world. She sought counsel where wisdom still lived. At last she traveled to the home of Hermione Granger, now long retired from the ministry but still regarded by many as one of the keenest minds in modern magic. The house stood on the edge of a forest, modest but filled with books and the scent of parchment and ink. Hermione greeted her with warmth, though curiosity gleamed behind her eyes. "You're the Gringotts curse breaker who vanished in France some months ago, aren't you? And yet here you are, alive and uncommonly quiet about it." Clara managed a tired smile. "Alive, yes. Quiet because words wouldn't be believed." "Try me," Hermione said simply. And so Clara told her everything, from the monastery and the Ashen Circle to Avalon and the merging of the stones. She spoke for hours, and Hermione listened without interruption, her expression growing ever graver. When at last Clara finished, the older witch rose and paced slowly before the hearth. "If what you say is true, you've not ended the legend. You've begun a new one."
The Philosopher's Stone was never just an object. It was an idea. And ideas have a way of rebirthing themselves. "I was hoping you'd say something reassuring," Clara said wearily. Hermione smiled wryly. "Reassurance is a luxury scholars can't afford. But hope we can manage. If the magic is reawakening, it can be guided, contained perhaps in a network of stabilizing runes linked to existing ley lines. I'll need help, and you, Miss Dunthorne, will be the key." Clara blinked. "Me? You're tied to the stones now. Their power responds to you, even in fragments. With your link and my research, we might prevent the world from tearing itself in half." For the first time in months, Clara felt a sense of direction, a thread in the chaos. She bowed her head. "Then let's begin." They worked together through the long winter, drawing charts and weaving enchantments that stretched from London to the farthest highlands. Scorpius Malfoy returned from Paris to aid them, carrying ancient scrolls that mapped the veins of magic beneath Europe. Neville Longbottom came too, lending his quiet strength and a lifetime's wisdom in the gentler arts. Piece by piece, they wove a great lattice of balance, a spell not to bind the world, but to remind it how to breathe. When it was done, they met once more on the cliffs of Skye, where it had all begun. There, as the sea crashed below, and the wind sang through the stones, Clara placed the gray gem upon the earth. Hermione murmured the final incantation. Scorpius added the alchemical sigil, and Neville planted a single seed at its center, a gift of living green. The gem cracked, and from within spilled not flame but light, soft gold and warm as dawn. It flowed into the soil, spreading outward like veins of sunlight beneath the ground. Across the world, subtle magic stirred, the ley lines realigned, rivers calmed, the air grew still. When the glow faded, the gem was gone. Only a small white flower remained where it had been, its petals glistening with dew, though no rain had fallen. Clara knelt beside it, her eyes shining. "It's finished." Hermione smiled. "For now. Balance, as your Flamel said, is never still, but you've given the world a chance."
Clara touched the flower gently, feeling its pulse beneath her fingertips. Then may it grow. They parted soon after, each to their own path, bound by a shared secret that would never grace any history book. As Clara descended the cliffs, she looked once more to the horizon, where sea met sky in an endless shimmer. Somewhere beyond sight and time, she thought she heard a voice. Flamel's, or perhaps her own memory. The world endures because someone always chooses to bear its weight. And with that thought, she smiled. The philosopher's stone was gone. The twin stones were dust. Yet their truth lived on, not in alchemists or kings, but in every act of balance, every choice between greed and grace. The age of the stones had ended, but the age of those who understood them had just begun. Winter yielded at last to spring, and the winds that swept through the British Isles carried with them the promise of new beginnings. Across the wizarding world, whispers of strange harmony spread, songs in the wind, silver lights over the moors, forests blooming out of season. The old magics were stirring once more, not in fury, but in renewal. Most thought it mere wonder, a trick of the changing year. Few knew that it was the quiet echo of a curse breaker's work, the healing breath of a world set back into balance. Clara Dunthorne had returned to wandering. Her name had not entered any record, and she preferred it so. Where others sought recognition, she sought silence. She traveled north again, through heather and rain, her cloak always dusted with the scent of wildflowers and sea salt. The memory of Avalon lingered in her dreams. The plain of silver, the tower of living roots, and Flamel's voice promising that balance is never still. Sometimes when twilight deepened and the stars appeared, she felt the faintest hum within her veins, a soft reminder that the stone's power still lived, diffused across the world. It no longer burned or demanded, but whispered gently like the heartbeat of the earth itself. One evening, while crossing a mist-laden glen near the ruins of an ancient abbey, Clara met an old man bent beneath the weight of a satchel full of herbs. He greeted her with a nod and eyes bright as candlelight. "A traveler, are you?" "For a time," she said. He studied her with the practiced look of one who has seen more than he admits. "Strange things are happening again," he murmured. "The ley lines hum at night. Stones sing beneath the ground. They say the world's bones are moving." Clara smiled faintly. "Perhaps it's simply waking from a long sleep." The old man nodded thoughtfully. "Then let us hope it wakes kindly." She left him there among the stones and walked until dusk turned to night. The stars seemed brighter that evening, the sky deeper and more alive. She felt no fear, only the vast, quiet weight of the truth she carried, that creation and ending are not enemies but partners in the dance of existence. When she reached the cliffs overlooking the sea, she stopped. Waves rolled far below, black and endless. The wind caught her hair, and for a long moment she simply stood there, letting the rhythm of the tide wash through her. She spoke softly, as though to the night itself. "It's done, Flamel. The world remembers, even if it forgets the names." The sea answered with a sigh. Then faintly she heard footsteps behind her. She turned to see Scorpius Malfoy, approaching through the grass, his coat whipping in the wind. He looked older, wearier, but his eyes were still alight with restless curiosity. "I thought I might find you here," he said. Clara smiled. "How long have you been following me?" "Long enough to know you don't stay in one place for long." He joined her at the cliff's edge. I've been studying the aftermath, the flow of magical energy since the stone's dissolution. It's extraordinary. Entire ecosystems of spellwork are regenerating themselves. Flamel's legacy has become organic. Magic was always alive, she said. We just forgot to listen. Scorpius nodded, gazing toward the horizon. And yet I can't help wondering, did we truly end it, or only change its form? Clara's eyes softened. Change is the only ending worth having. For a while they stood in silence. The sea roared far below, a sound both ancient and eternal. Scorpius reached into his coat and drew out a small vial. Inside shimmered a faint dusting of gold, the last trace of their alchemical network, collected from the soil of sky. I kept this, he said quietly, a reminder. She took the vial, turning it between her fingers. The dust shimmered like sunlight trapped in glass. Then you remember the power isn't what saves us. Choice does. He smiled faintly. You sound like a professor. Perhaps one day I'll be one, she said, but not yet. They parted soon after. Scorpius returned south to continue his studies, while Clara turned east, drawn by instinct more than purpose. She wandered through small wizarding villages and vast muggle cities alike, blending unseen among both worlds. Wherever she went, life seemed to flourish. Flowers blooming early, old trees growing new shoots, spells long thought lost suddenly sparking to life again. She said nothing of it. Magic would find its own way now. Months passed, and one bright morning she found herself in a small valley, dotted with spring flowers. A stream ran clear through its center, its banks carpeted with moss. She knelt to drink, and as she did, something gleamed beneath the water, a pebble, gray and ordinary, yet faintly warm. When she picked it up, she felt the same pulse she'd once felt from the stone itself, gentle, rhythmic, alive. Not power, not promise, simply presence. She smiled, placed it back in the stream, and whispered, "Be free." The water carried it away, and she felt a quiet peace settle within her. Perhaps the world would always hold such fragments, small pieces of magic, reminders of the eternal cycle, and perhaps that was as it should be. That night she camped beneath the stars once more. The air was cool and the sky vast with constellations she had never learned by name. The wind sang softly through the grass, carrying voices from nowhere, echoes of laughter, spells, and dreams. Somewhere, an owl called. As she drifted towards sleep, she imagined Hogwarts, its towers gleaming beneath moonlight. She pictured Neville tending his greenhouses, Cho watching over her students, Scorpius scribbling runes by candlelight. They would all go on, as would she. The age of the stones was finished, but life itself was the true alchemy, endlessly remade. In the quiet between dreams, she felt the faintest touch upon her mind, a familiar voice, warm and ageless. Balance endures. Rest now, seeker, and she did. Years passed, and the tale of the Philosopher's Stone faded once again into legend. Students at Hogwarts spoke of it as myth, a story for history of magic exams or late-night debates in common rooms. Few remembered Nicholas Flamel, and fewer still knew the name of Clara Dunthorne. Yet sometimes, when a student cast a spell perfectly for the first time, or when a herb blossomed in winter against all reason, professors would pause and feel something, an old, quiet harmony thrumming through the air. No one could explain it. Most didn't try. But those who listened closely swore they could almost hear a whisper in the wind. The truth of Flamel was not immortality, but balance. And so the world moved on. Seasons turned. New generations rose, and the magic of creation and ending continued its eternal dance. Somewhere beyond the mortal realm, in the place between life and death, two intertwined circles glowed faintly, neither stone nor flame, but the memory of both. They pulsed once like a heartbeat, then fell still, and thus ended the last chapter of the Philosopher's Stone, not with the promise of eternal life, but with the quiet, everlasting truth that every ending is but another beginning.